Hi guys, welcome to Art and Design week 3. Okay, so for today, as you can see in the title, we'll be drawing flowers. First off, we gotta prepare our materials. So make sure you always check the introduction for each week. It's because I need to tell you guys what materials we're going to use, like what mediums. So you've been using pencil and pen, right? So for this week, you get to pick whether you want both, one or the other. So it's up to you. In the end, always draw what feels right to you, okay? But what I can do is just suggest something to you. So for now, I'm going to be using both today, but it's once again up to you however you want to do it. But I'll show you what I'll be doing. So when we're talking about constructing a flower, I know that most of us can just look at it and we can draw it. Like, okay, the petal goes here, 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 and that's no problem, right? So that is basically called freehand drawing. So freehand drawing meaning like your hand has lots of freedom. It's totally free to just draw whatever. But what I'll be teaching today is something called construction. So we're going to construct an object using simple shapes. So the easiest way to tell you about this is basically this. This is a massage ball, right? And if you take a closer look, it's like a bit complicated because there's lots of ridges and there's lots of bumps and stuff like that. So when you're looking at it, it might feel overwhelming because there's so many things to draw. But if we think of it in a simple shape, a circle, right? So once you start with a circle first, and then you add on these small bumps, it becomes a lot easier to draw, and so you don't feel so overwhelmed by how complicated it is. So construction is just like that. We're going to look at each object and we're going to create it from a simple shape. So stuff like this, of course, we can just draw the shape from our minds. That means like a freehand. But if you were to construct it, you will look at it as a whole shape. So it's mostly rectangular, so it chips in a bit. So that's what we'll be doing today. I'm showing you guys how to construct things using simple shapes so that when you get to a very difficult shape, like something you're not familiar with, you can just slowly craft it out. Slowly make sure that these, like stuff like this, is a rectangle and then a smaller rectangle, and so it just becomes a lot easier in the drawing process. So the first step that we're going to do is that we are going to be drawing a flower with a circle. Why do we start with a circle? It's because when the flower blooms or when it opens, right? It's usually in a circle or usually in an oval shape because flowers tend to be closed up and then they bloom, open up in a circular fashion. So when we're drawing a simple shape of flowers, we are going to be using circles as the base. So we start off with the outer circle, which means where the petals end, and we're going to go to the inside, meaning this part, meaning the center. So each flower usually has a center. It's not always circle, which I'm going to tell you beforehand, because when you are looking at some of the images I sent over, and okay, so now is the time you look at the images I sent. I sent 3 images to all of you, and these 3 images have a total of 5 photos. So what are these photos called? Whenever you're looking at something to draw, or whether you're looking at the object or a reference, meaning the pictures that I've sent or perhaps real life objects, those are called references. It's because you're referring to it while you're drawing. So it's what you are intending to draw and what you're looking at. So when you look at the 5 references I sent you, they are all simple shaped flowers and they are all easily constructed using this method that I'm going to show you, okay? The next thing that I need you guys to do is basically open page 1 of the reference. There should be 2 photos inside, and the first one to your left is going to be a long petal flower. Both of them are yellow. I know, yellow flowers are kind of nice, right? So we'll be starting on how to construct this long petaled flower on the left using this method of simple shapes. As I mentioned just now, this wider circle here is where the petals end. So First of all, I'd like you guys to construct a circle. It can be as big or as small as you want, but once again, as a reminder, I always say the bigger the better. It's because when you draw big, easier to shrink down. Small to big is a bit harder. So once you get used to drawing big, it's no problem at all. Okay, so once you guys have started drawing this larger circle, we're gonna now look at the smaller circle. I'm gonna make it a bit smaller because the petals are pretty long. So one of the most important parts is that when we're referring to objects or we're looking at a reference, we must always remember the most important skill, which is to observe. So observing is one of the basic artist skill, but it's very, very important. So we're going to look at it properly and not just assume. Sometimes we think that, oh, I know what it is and there's nothing to worry about, whatever. So, but actually, when we look closer, we realize that sometimes we miss out on certain things that we don't realize. So when you're looking at something, remember to just observe it a little longer. There's nothing to lose. So when I'm looking at the left side photo, which is the long petaled flower, I'm thinking, the petals are pretty long. So I'm going to make sure that my petals, as I draw it, is going to be long as well. So that's why I made the center a bit smaller so that my petals can be a lot longer. Okay, so this center circle, as I mentioned, is the center of the flower. And now I'm going to start drawing out lines. So what are these lines? These lines are basically guides for you to construct your flower. So I'm trying to simplify it as easy as possible so that when you draw it later on, it's easier for you guys to construct it. So these lines are, what are they? They are actually the center of each petal. So for each petal, if you notice, right, they are actually symmetrical. Symmetry, yeah. So symmetrical means that both sides are the same. So when you're drawing your petals, I'm using this line as a guide for me so that I will know both sides are the same. So it's just a guide so I know where to place my lines. And you don't have to exactly be in the center all the time, but it's a good place for you to start if you don't know where to start. So I'm just going to draw it out lightly, and you can see that as I'm drawing with the pencil, right, I'm drawing pretty lightly. So one of the things that we do when we're drawing to start is I draw lightly to sketch. So when you're sketching, that means you're trying to construct it out or you're trying to create something, but you're not sure yet. So sketching is usually done quite light. This is because if, let's say, I press hard on it and I'm sketching, right, I'm like, okay, I'm going to draw this and it's going to look great. And then I change my mind and then I suddenly was like, okay, I don't think so. But if you look closer, the mark is already there. And sometimes the mark doesn't go away and that frustrates us usually. Like for me personally, it frustrates me. So I usually never draw heavily because I realized my mistake when I was younger that I can't erase those marks anymore and I regret it. So the next step now is after you've got all this sketch done, now the second part is that you look at your flower again. So what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to stop using a pencil and I'm going to focus on the outline of the flower. So outline means that it's just going to be the shape. You don't have to make it exactly the same in terms of color or stuff like that. We're just trying to get the shape right using just simple shapes to construct it. So I'm going to use this pen. It's a different type of pen from last week. It's a bit more like a felt pen. But so the next part is you look at each and individual petal. So each petal is a bit different. You can see it if you observe, okay? So this one, what I noticed is that their petals have a little ridge here. And so the shape of the petal is like that, meaning there's some pointy bits. It's not just a flat petal. So this takes some time to observe and understand, but it's something that you need to bear in mind for all your drawing. So this is the center. I'm just going to fill this out here and I'm going to continue drawing my petals. So while you're drawing your petals, there's no real hurry. I really suggest that you keep looking at the reference just so that you are more sure of yourself. But at the same time, don't stress, okay? So I know it gets kind of stressful when it doesn't look exactly the same, but remember, drawing is a lot of practice, and when you draw more often, the better you can be. So I'm just going to draw it simple here so that we can move on to the topic and I don't take up too much of your time. Okay, I'm going to just draw it a bit simpler and a bit faster. But when it's your turn, you guys need to remember to observe a bit more as you're drawing it. So make sure the shape of the petals are what it looks like in the photo. Doesn't have to be exactly the same, but always make an effort to make sure it looks similar. So once this is done, that's it. So this is just the outline of your flower. So this is done just constructing by using a circle, 2 circles in fact. So if there was a stem, you just add it on. So different angles of flowers means that maybe this is an oval and maybe the center is just a bit to the right. So then you can divide it up by petals, of course, or I move on to the next one, which is the daffodil. So it's still on page 1 reference, the right side, okay? So as I mentioned before, right, the petals are different for each flower, and also the center is different for each flower. So this center looks quite different, right? So the first part is that you need to look at the flower and, okay, so this is how the daffodil petals end, and there's gonna be a center here. It's not that big. Okay, so the center circle means how big or small the center is. So the daffodils one is not so big, so I put it like this. And I know that there's lots of detail in the daffodils, but I'm just going to leave this here for now and construct it with you, okay? So the next part is we're going to try dividing the petals. So there's another way of dividing other than this way. This was the center line, right? So now this way is something else, which is basically you're going to try to section the petals. So this is one petal, this is another petal, this is another petal that I can see, and another one here, another smaller one here, there's one over here, and one here, and finally there's one at the side. So what this does is basically it gives you a guide for you to put your petals in. So I'm going to fill my petals now because I already sketched out where it's supposed to be. So this makes it easier when you are trying to complete it. So once again, remember to look at each different petal because they're all different. So each flower will have a different type of petal, and that's just absolutely normal. Okay. So now, next part is that we're going to ink it, okay? So while I'm inking it, I'm going to just look at the center, and the center is not just a circle, it has lots of dots. So I'm just going to fill it in with some dots, and now I'm going to draw the petals. There's one hiding over here. This one's a bit separated. And this one, remember which one is on top also counts. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's good to always remember to look while you're drawing. So while I'm drawing this, I'm also looking at it on the side. And of course, if you spend more time, it will look a lot better, but once again, this is just a quick demonstration for you guys to see how you can construct it out easily, okay? Using circles as your guide. So it's just like this. If you want to construct your own flower, for the 6th one, surprise, surprise, you're going to construct your own. So after drawing 5 from the references I have attached, you have to complete 5 outlines of the flowers using construction method, okay? So not freehand, because I can tell. So try to construct it out. It's just a good behavior habit to have when you're drawing, because right now things are easy, but when it gets harder, you'll get confused easier. So when you're constructing your own flower, you can create any kind of petal you want. So let's just say you want a complicated petal. So why not? You can just go for it, okay? So if you want a really complicated petal, then you can just create your own complicated petal. So remember why we're using those lines. It's just for you to have a guide of where your petals are supposed to go. So, and that's it. So if you want to add a stem, go ahead and you can add leaves, or you can always look at real images of flowers, or if you have flowers in the garden, you can take a look. But for now, we're going to use the references that I sent, is because so I can have a better understanding of how you're doing your work. But if you were to just go outside and get flowers, I have no idea how it really looks like, so I can't compare. So this is just you training your hands to construct things using a shape, a simple shape, to make that happen. So good luck, guys, and remember to finish up, pass up your assignment, and I'll mark it and go over it with you guys, okay? So have fun drawing. Bye. See you guys next week.